Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You've survived modern winters with central heating and weather apps. So yeah, you probably won't survive this either. But let's pretend it's January 12th, 1888, and you're waking up on the Dakota prairie to the warmest morning you've felt in weeks. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not going to chase you with a pitchfork over it. And hey, drop your city and the time you're watching this down in the comments. I love knowing who else is awake during these quiet hours. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a sod house that smells like earth and yesterday's porridge. Your pillow is a folded coat. Your blanket is wool so scratchy it feels like sleeping under a cat's tongue. But here's the weird part. You're not freezing. For the first time in weeks, the air doesn't bite your lungs when you breathe. You crack open your eyes and see frost melting on the inside of the window. Actual liquid water running down the glass like tiny rivers. It's January in Dakota territory, and it feels like spring decided to crash the party uninvited. You sit up, your joints creaking like old floorboards. The fire in the corner has burned down to embers, but you're not shivering. That's strange. Really strange. You've lived through enough prairie winters to know that January doesn't do mercy. January is the month that kills cattle and splits fence posts and makes grown men cry into their coffee. But today feels almost balmy. You might not realise it yet, but you're experiencing what meteorologists would later call a warm front before a massive cold snap. Think of it like your phone showing full battery right before it dies completely. Spoiler, it's lying to you. You pull on your boots, stiff leather that's been frozen solid for weeks, and step outside. The sun is already up, pale and watery, but there. You can see your breath, sure, but it's more mist than ice. The snow underfoot has that soft melting quality, almost like walking on wet sand. Your neighbour, Ole, is already outside, grinning like he just won a bet with God himself. "Can you believe this?" he shouts across the fence line, his Norwegian accent thick as butter. "I'm taking the wagon to Parker today. Roads are clear. You want to come?" You consider it. Parker is 23 miles south. 6 hours of travel, maybe more in winter. But you need lamp oil and coffee, and your wife has been giving you that look. The one that says the coffee situation is becoming a marital issue. You tell Ole you'll think about it. He nods, already hitching his horses, whistling some old folk tune that sounds like optimism set to melody. You watch him work and feel something you haven't felt in months. Hope. Dangerous, stupid hope. Here's a historical fact. On the morning of January 12th, 1888, temperatures across the northern Great Plains were unseasonably warm. In some areas, thermometers read above freezing, even reaching into the 40s Fahrenheit. After weeks of brutal cold, settlers interpreted this as a break in the weather. Schools reopened. Farmers ventured out. Children played outside without heavy coats. What they didn't know was that an Arctic cold front was racing south at nearly 40 miles per hour, and it would arrive without warning. You walk over to the schoolhouse, a small wooden building about a mile from your farm. Your daughter Emma is 8 years old, and she's been cooped up inside for days because of the cold. Today she'll finally go back to school. You can see her through the window, already dressed, bouncing on her toes with excitement. She's wearing her good dress, the one with the tiny flowers embroidered on the collar. Not her heavy wool coat, not her thick mittens. Because why would she? It's warm outside, practically summer. Your wife hands Emma a small lunch pail. Bread and butter, a boiled egg, maybe an apple if you're lucky. Emma grabs it and runs out the door before you can stop her. She's joined by other children on the road, the Fisher boys, the Miller girl, all of them laughing, throwing snowballs that are more slush than ice. You watch them disappear over the hill toward the schoolhouse, and something in your chest tightens. Not quite fear, not yet, just unease. Like when you hear a dog bark at nothing in the dark. You head back inside and sit down for breakfast. Porridge. Again. Always porridge. Your wife mentions that the sky looks strange to the northwest. You glance out the window and see what she means. There's a dark line on the horizon, like someone drew it with charcoal. It's probably nothing. Storm clouds build and break up all the time out here, The prairie sky is moody like a teenager with a diary. You finish your porridge and reach for your coat. You've got fence repairs to do. And the weather won't wait forever. But here's what you don't know. That dark line on the horizon isn't a storm cloud. It's a wall. A moving wall of Arctic air travelling faster than a galloping horse. In 30 minutes, it will be here. In 2 hours, you'll be fighting for your life. And Emma, your daughter with the embroidered flowers on her collar, will be running through a blizzard so violent that visibility drops to 0. She won't make it home. Neither will most of the other children. Welcome to the Schoolhouse Blizzard, the deadliest winter storm you've never heard of. You're halfway through fixing the fence when Ol rides past on his wagon, waving like he's off to a Sunday picnic. "Still time to join me," he shouts. You wave back but shake your head. The fence won't fix itself, and besides, you're not sure you trust this weather. It feels too good, too easy, like the universe is setting you up for a punchline. The work is simple. Replace a broken post, restring some wire. Your hands are bare because gloves make it harder to grip the tools, and honestly it's warm enough that you don't need them. That should be your first clue. When you can work barehanded in January on the Dakota prairie, something is cosmically wrong. It's like finding a spider in your house and thinking, it's probably friendly. Spoiler, it's never friendly. You finish the post and step back to admire your work. The fence looks solid, straight. The kind of fence that says, I am a competent adult who owns land and makes reasonable decisions. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. Then the wind changes. Not gradually. Not like a normal shift in breeze. It just flips. Like someone threw a switch. 1 second the air is still. The next there's a shove at your back so hard you stumble forward. The temperature drops. Fast. You can feel it on your skin, like someone dumped ice water down your spine. You look up, and the dark line on the horizon isn't a line anymore. It's a wall. A black churning wall stretching from the ground to the sky, and it's eating the world. You've seen storms before. Everyone out here has. But this is different. This is personal. This is the kind of storm that looks at you and says, yeah, you specifically, I'm coming for you. Here's a fringe fact. Some survivors later described the approaching blizzard as sounding like a freight train or continuous thunder. The noise came from the wind, which was moving so fast and carrying so much snow that it created a roar audible from miles away. Imagine standing on train tracks and hearing the whistle in the distance. Now imagine you can't get off the tracks. That's what this felt like. You drop your tools and run. The house is maybe 200 yards away, but it feels like 2 miles. The wind is already screaming and snow is starting to fall. Not the gentle Christmas card kind of snow. This is horizontal snow. Angry snow. Snow with a personal vendetta. By the time you reach the door, you can barely see your own hands. You slam the door shut and look at your wife. She looks at you. And both of you realise the same thing at the exact same time. Emma's at school. Your wife grabs your arm. You have to get her. Her voice is steady, but her eyes are wild. You nod, already reaching for your heavy coat. But even as you put it on, you know this is bad. Really bad. The kind of bad where people write sad songs about you later. You tie a rope around your waist. Your wife ties the other end to the doorframe. Don't let go of the rope, she says. If you let go, you'll die. She's not being dramatic, she's being accurate. In a whiteout blizzard, you can get lost 10 feet from your own door. Your sense of direction vanishes. Up and down become meaningless. You might think you're walking in a straight line, but you're actually going in circles. And circles don't lead to rescued daughters. They lead to frozen corpses found 3 feet from safety, with newspapers writing tragic headlines about irony. You step outside, and the world disappears. There's no school, no barn, no old house across the field. Just white chaos and wind so loud it drowns out your own thoughts. The cold hits you like a fist. Your face goes numb in seconds. Your eyes water, and the tears freeze on your cheeks. You take one step, then another. The rope goes taut. You're already at the limit. 20 feet from your door and you can't see anything. Not the school, not the road, nothing. You stand there, rope cutting into your waist, snow pelting your face like tiny knives, and you understand something terrible. You can't save her. You can't even find the school. If you let go of this rope, you'll die. And if you die, who will take care of your wife? Who will run the farm? You're facing the math of survival, and it doesn't care about love or fatherhood or embroidered flowers on collars. You pull yourself back, hand over hand along the rope, hating yourself with every step. Your wife sees your face when you come inside and doesn't ask. She just sits down heavily on the bench by the fire and stares at nothing. Outside, the wind howls like something alive and furious. The house shakes. Snow finds every crack, every gap, piling up in tiny drifts on the windowsills and floor. You think about Emma. She's smart. The teacher will keep them inside. They'll be fine. The schoolhouse has a stove and walls and a door that locks. They'll wait it out. You repeat this to yourself like a prayer. Like saying it enough times will make it true. But deep down, in that part of your brain that knows things before your heart catches up, you already know. She's not fine. None of them are fine. And you're right. Let's freeze time at 11:45 a.m. and look at what's happening across the Great Plains. Because in 15 minutes, everything is going to change, and these people don't know it yet. This is the last normal moment. The last time the world makes sense. Think of it like the moment before you hit send on a text you'll regret. Everything still feels fine, you're in control, then you're not. In Plainview, Nebraska, a teacher named Loie Royce is teaching arithmetic to 17 children. She's 23 years old, originally from Massachusetts, and she came west for adventure and a paycheck. She's writing fractions on the blackboard with chalk that squeaks just enough to make the kids wince. The schoolhouse is warm. She stoked the fire an hour ago and it's burning nicely. Through the west window she can see dark clouds building, but storms build all the time. She's not worried. She's thinking about dinner and whether she should order that new dress from the catalogue. In 3 hours she will lose both of her feet to frostbite. In Huron, Dakota territory, a dairy farmer named Thomas Gilkerson is loading hay onto his wagon with his hired man, Otto. They're debating whether to make one more trip before heading back. The sky's getting dark, but they're tough men who've worked in bad weather before. They decide to make one more trip. Otto will make it home alive, but with severe frostbite on his hands and face. Thomas will freeze to death less than a mile from his barn, his body found 3 days later, still holding the reins. In Mira Valley, Nebraska, 19-year-old Minnie Freeman is bored out of her mind. She's teaching for the first time, and the curriculum is mind-numbing. Penmanship drills, multiplication tables, spelling bees. She's daydreaming about the job offer in Omaha she turned down. At least seamstress work would have been more exciting than this. In 90 minutes, the roof of her schoolhouse will blow off, and she'll have to lead 13 children through a blizzard to safety using a rope and sheer determination. She'll become a national hero. Songs will be written about her. But right now, she's just a bored teenager counting down the minutes until lunch. In your daughter's schoolhouse, Miss Loie Royce is teaching the children about George Washington and the cherry tree. Emma is sitting in the third row, chewing on her pencil and staring out the window. She's thinking about the snow, how it's starting to fall faster now, how the wind is making a strange whistling sound through the eaves. The other children are getting restless. It's almost lunchtime, and they're hungry. Then the wind changes. It doesn't build gradually. It just hits. 1 second, gentle breeze. The next, a roar like thunder that doesn't stop. Every child looks up at once, papers fly off desks. The door rattles in its frame. Miss Royce drops her chalk and runs to the window. What she sees makes her stomach drop. The storm is already here, already surrounding them. The world outside is white chaos. She can't see the road, can't see the neighbouring farms, can't see anything but snow and wind and darkness. One of the smallest children starts to cry, then another. Within seconds, all 17 children are panicking. "I want to go home," they scream. "I want my mama." Miss Royce is trying to keep them calm, but she's barely holding it together herself. She's never seen a storm come up this fast. The sky went from blue to black in 5 minutes. That's not normal, that's not natural. Then she hears a different sound. A tearing, groaning sound. She looks up just in time to see one of the roof planks lift and peel back. Wind pours through the gap like water through a breached dam. Papers explode into the air. The stove starts smoking as the draft reverses. Within minutes, the roof is in real danger of coming off completely. Miss Royce makes her decision. They're leaving. Her boarding house is only 90 yards away. The children know the way. They can make it. They have to, because staying here means freezing when the roof collapses. She gathers the children and starts tying them together with jump ropes, scarves, torn strips of fabric. "Hold hands," she tells them. "Don't let go for any reason." 3 of the smallest children are crying so hard they can barely breathe. Your daughter Emma is one of them. "I want to go home," she keeps saying. "Please, I just want to go home." Miss Royce hesitates. Emma's house is actually closer than the boarding house, maybe 60 yards instead of 90, and it's in the same general direction. Maybe it makes sense to let her try. "All right," Miss Royce says. "Emma, you can go, but run. Run as fast as you can and don't stop." She opens the door and Emma bolts out into the white chaos. The wind catches her like a leaf. She stumbles, catches herself, and then she's gone, swallowed by the snow. Miss Royce will replay this moment for the rest of her life. She'll wonder if she made the right call. The answer is no. But how could she have known? Emma runs. She can't see anything, but she knows home is this direction. She's walked this path 1,000 times. She just needs to keep going straight. But straight doesn't exist anymore. The wind pushes her sideways. The snow blinds her. She puts her hands out, trying to feel for the fence line, but there's nothing. Just cold and white and noise. She falls, gets up, falls again. Her dress is soaked. Her hands are numb. She can't feel her feet. She's crying, but the tears freeze on her face. She tries to call for help, but the wind steals her voice. She's 8 years old, and she's alone in a blizzard that will kill 235 people. She won't be found until spring, 70 yards from her front door. So, you're still in your house, rope coiled on the floor like a dead snake, staring at the door and hating yourself. Your wife hasn't moved from the bench. She's just sitting there, hands folded in her lap, face blank. You've seen that look before. It's the look people get when their brain can't process what's happening, so it just shuts down. Like when your computer freezes and the cursor won't move. She's frozen. You're frozen. And outside, the world is literally trying to kill everything in it. The temperature has dropped 60 degrees in less than 3 hours. Think about that for a second. 60 degrees, from above freezing to 40 below zero. Your body doesn't know how to process that kind of change. It's like jumping from a sauna into liquid nitrogen. Except you can't escape. You're just in it, breathing it. Feeling your lungs burn with every inhale because the air is so cold, it's basically a weapon. Here's a disturbing meteorological fact. During the Schoolhouse Blizzard, wind speeds reached an estimated 70 to 80 miles per hour. Combined with temperatures dropping to minus 40 Fahrenheit, the wind chill was calculated at around minus 80 to minus 100 degrees. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 5 minutes. Your body starts shutting down non-essential functions. Blood retreats from your extremities to protect your core. Your fingers and toes are sacrificed first. Then your nose, your ears. Anything that sticks out becomes a liability. You walk to the window and try to look outside, but there's nothing to see. Just white. Solid white. It's like someone painted over the glass. You can't even tell if it's day or night. The wind is so loud it sounds like the house is inside a waterfall. Every few minutes there's a crash as something blows past. A fence post. A piece of roof. Maybe someone's wagon. You have no idea. The house shudders with each gust and you start wondering if the walls will hold. They're just sod and wood. Not exactly engineered for apocalypse conditions. Your wife finally speaks. "She's smart," she says quietly. "Emma's smart. She'll stay inside." You nod because what else can you do? Tell her the truth? That you saw Miss Royce opening the schoolhouse door right before visibility dropped to zero? That you heard children screaming? That you know Emma would rather run home than stay in a building that's coming apart at the seams? No! You don't say any of that. You just nod and add another log to the fire. But let's leave you for a moment and check in on what's actually happening out there. Because while you're sitting in your house trying to convince yourself everything will be fine, the prairie is becoming a graveyard. About a mile south of your farm, Ole, your neighbour, who left so cheerfully this morning, is realising he made a terrible mistake. His wagon is stuck in a snowdrift that appeared out of nowhere. The horses are panicking, pulling in opposite directions. One of them trips and goes down, tangled in the harness. Ole jumps off the wagon to help, and that's when he loses his bearings. He takes 3 steps away from the wagon. Just 3. And when he turns around, the wagon is gone. Vanished. He can't see it. Can't hear it over the wind. Somewhere behind him. Maybe 5 feet away, but he has no idea which direction. He stands there, turning in circles, hands stretched out like a blind man. Nothing. Just snow and wind and cold so intense it feels like his face is being stabbed with tiny needles. He picks a direction and walks. After what feels like an hour but is probably 5 minutes, his foot hits something. He reaches down. It's a fence post. Thank God. He grabs it and starts following the fence line. But fence lines go on for miles, and he doesn't know which direction he's going. Is he heading toward his farm? Toward town? Toward absolutely nothing? He doesn't know. So he keeps walking, one hand on the fence, one arm wrapped around his face to protect it from the wind. His fingers are already numb. His feet feel like blocks of wood. He's pretty sure he's dying, but he doesn't have a better plan, so he just keeps moving. In 6 hours, he'll stumble into a barn that doesn't belong to him, collapse in a horse stall, and sleep for 14 hours. He'll lose 3 toes and most of his right ear to frostbite, but he'll live. He's one of the lucky ones. 3 miles east, in a different schoolhouse, a teacher named Etta Shattuck is facing an impossible decision. She has 14 children in her care, and the building is falling apart. The windows have already shattered. Snow is pouring in. The stove went out 10 minutes ago because the wind keeps reversing the draft. The children are huddled together in the centre of the room, shivering and crying. The smallest ones have already stopped crying. That's worse. When they stop crying, it means they're shutting down. Etta knows she has 2 choices. Stay here and freeze slowly as the building loses all its heat, or try to make a run for the nearest farmhouse, which she thinks is maybe 200 yards north. She's not sure. She's never had to measure the distance before. Why would she? But now it matters. Now it's the difference between life and death. She chooses to stay. It's the right choice, even though it doesn't feel like it. She gathers all the children into the smallest corner of the room and starts piling desks around them as a windbreak. She tears pages out of textbooks and stuffs them into the cracks in the walls. She takes off her coat and wraps it around the 2 smallest children who are already turning blue. Then she huddles with them and waits. Just waits. For hours. For the wind to stop. For someone to rescue them. For anything. They'll all survive. Barely. 2 of the children will lose fingers. 1 will lose both feet. But they'll survive because Etta Shattuck made the right call and stayed put. She'll never teach again. The trauma breaks something in her, and she moves back east within 6 months. But she saves 14 lives, and that counts for something. Now let's check on someone who made the wrong choice. About 7 miles northeast of your farm in a schoolhouse near Seward, Nebraska, a 21-year-old teacher named Lois May Royce is leading 17 children through hell on a rope. Remember her? She was teaching fractions this morning and thinking about ordering a new dress. Now she's playing a real-life game of follow the leader where losing means death. She opened the schoolhouse door 30 minutes ago, and the wind almost ripped it off the hinges. The children screamed. She screamed. But staying wasn't an option because the roof was literally peeling off like the lid of a tin can. So she tied them together with whatever she could find. Jump ropes, scarves, her own belt, and now they're walking blind through a blizzard that wants them dead. She thinks her boarding house is this direction. She's walked this path every day for 2 months. 90 yards. That's nothing. You could throw a rock that far. But when you can't see your own hand in front of your face, 90 yards might as well be 90 miles. She's leading the line, one hand stretched out, feeling for anything. A fence, a building, a tree, anything to tell her she's going the right way. Behind her, the children are crying. The littlest ones are already falling. She has to stop every few steps to pull them back up. The rope is cutting into her waist. Her hands are so numb she can barely feel the rope anymore. She's terrified she's going to let go and lose all of them, but she doesn't let go. She just keeps walking, dragging this human chain of crying, freezing children through snow that's already up to her knees. Here's something horrifying. Later investigations showed that Lois May Royce and her students walked more than a mile in the blizzard. They completely missed the boarding house. They walked right past it without knowing it was there. For over an hour they wandered in circles, getting more lost, getting colder, getting closer to death with every step. The only reason they didn't all die is because they stumbled, completely by accident, into a farmhouse belonging to a Norwegian immigrant named Ola Olsen. He heard something banging on his door, opened it, and 17 frozen children fell into his house like a pile of snow-covered cordwood. They made it, but barely, and the cost was brutal. Lois May Royce suffered severe frostbite on both feet. Gangrene set in within a week. The doctor had no choice. He amputated both feet at the ankle. She was 23 years old. She went from planning her future to learning how to walk on prosthetics in less than a week. She'd never teach again, never dance at her own wedding, never walk on a beach or climb stairs without pain, all because she tried to save her students, and she was one of the lucky ones she survived. Let's talk about the ones who didn't. Because while you're sitting in your house listening to the wind and praying your daughter is okay, dozens of children are dying within a 5-mile radius of where you're sitting. They're dying in snowdrifts. They're dying huddled under bridges. They're dying holding hands with their siblings, trying to keep each other warm. And they're dying because adults made reasonable decisions based on bad information. In Holt County, Nebraska, 2 brothers, Walter and Ida Allen, left school together when the storm hit. They held hands and ran toward home. They made it 30 feet before they lost their sense of direction. They wandered for hours, calling for their parents, calling for help. No one could hear them over the wind. They were found 2 days later, frozen together, still holding hands. Walter was 6, Ida was 5. In Plainview, Nebraska, 3 children named James, Lydia and Sarah tried to make it home together. They were siblings. They'd walked this path every day for years, but the snow was already too deep. They got stuck in a drift and couldn't get out. They huddled together for warmth. It wasn't enough. Their bodies were found 70 yards from their front door, still wrapped around each other. In Wayne County, Nebraska, a 9-year-old boy named Johan Albus decided to run home when the teacher opened the door. He was fast. He was confident. He knew the way. His body was found 3 weeks later when the snow melted. He'd made it within 50 feet of his house before he collapsed. His mother had been standing at the window the entire time, watching, waiting, praying. She never saw him. He was right there, and she never saw him. This is what the Schoolhouse Blizzard did. It killed children within sight of safety. It killed them in their own yards. It killed them 50 feet from their parents. And it did it in a matter of hours, not days. Hours. Because the temperature dropped so fast and the wind blew so hard that the human body couldn't compensate. You didn't freeze slowly. You froze fast. Your extremities went first. Then your core temperature started dropping. Then your brain started shutting down. Then you laid down in the snow because it seemed like a reasonable thing to do. Then you died. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, their parents could hear them. In some cases, parents stood at their windows and heard their children screaming for help just a few yards away. But they couldn't go out, because going out meant dying. They had to choose between saving their children and saving themselves, and most of them chose themselves. Because that's what humans do when the math gets that brutal. We survive. Even when survival means living with guilt that will eat us alive for the rest of our lives. You don't know any of this yet. You're still sitting in your house, convincing yourself Emma is fine. But deep down, you know. You know the same way you know when a tooth is about to fall out. There's a wrongness in the air, a sense that something fundamental is broken. You look at your wife. She looks at you. Neither of you says anything, because there's nothing to say. You just wait, and hope, and pray to a God who doesn't seem to be listening. It's been 3 hours since the storm hit, and the world still doesn't exist. You've checked the door 6 times. Same result every time. White chaos. Wind. Cold that hits you like a physical blow. You close the door quickly each time because every second it's open, the temperature inside drops by a degree. The fire is roaring, but it doesn't matter. The house is losing heat faster than the fire can generate it. You're burning through your wood pile at an alarming rate. You start doing math in your head. How long can the wood last? 2 days? 3? What happens when it runs out? Your wife is rationing the food now. She's already thinking ahead, already preparing for the possibility that this storm lasts longer than one night. She's pulling out the emergency supplies, dried beans, salt pork, flour, the stuff you save for when things go really wrong. Things have officially gone really wrong. You watch her work and realise she's already accepted something you haven't. Emma isn't coming home tonight. Maybe not tomorrow either. Maybe not at all. You refuse to accept this, so you distract yourself. You reinforce the door with extra boards. You stuff rags into the cracks around the windows. You do all the small, pointless tasks that make you feel like you're in control of something. Because the alternative is sitting still and thinking about your daughter freezing to death in the dark, and you can't think about that. If you think about that, you'll go insane. So you just keep moving, keep working, keep pretending this is survivable. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at what's happening across the Great Plains. Because this storm isn't just hitting your farm, it's hitting everywhere, from Montana to Texas, from Iowa to Wyoming. Hundreds of thousands of square miles are under assault by wind and snow and cold that hasn't been seen in decades. Entire towns are cut off. Railroad tracks are buried under 15-foot drifts. Telegraph lines are down. Communication is impossible. Every community is isolated, trapped, alone. In Huron, Dakota Territory, the storm hits at 11:40 a.m. Within 10 minutes, the entire city disappears. People walking down Main Street get lost between buildings. A mail carrier trying to deliver letters to the hotel across the street wanders in circles for 2 hours before stumbling back to the post office by sheer luck. He's missing 2 fingers by the time they get him inside. Businesses shut down, schools close, everyone just hunkers down and waits. But not everyone makes it inside in time. Thomas Gilkerson, the dairy farmer we mentioned earlier, is caught in the open with his hired man, Otto. They're loading hay when the storm hits. They immediately unhitch the horses and try to ride home. Bad idea. The horses panic and bolt in opposite directions. Thomas gets thrown. He lands in a snowdrift, and by the time he gets up, he can't see his own horse, can't see Otto, can't see anything. He starts walking. He thinks he's heading toward his barn. He's not. He's walking parallel to his property line, moving farther from safety with every step. After an hour, he's exhausted. The cold is winning. He can't feel his hands. His feet are just stumps of pain. He knows he's dying, but his brain won't fully accept it. So he keeps walking, 1 foot in front of the other, walking toward nothing. He dies sometime around 4:30 p.m., less than a mile from his barn. His body won't be found for 3 days. When they finally locate him, he's frozen solid, still holding the reins from his horse. The horse is found alive, standing in a ravine, confused but unharmed. Animals have better survival instincts than humans. The horse found shelter. Thomas didn't. Otto, the hired man, makes it home, but he pays for it. Severe frostbite on his hands, face and feet. He loses 3 fingers and part of his nose. He'll never work as a farmhand again. The dexterity is gone. He ends up moving to Omaha and working in a factory, bitter and broken, drinking himself to death by 1895. The storm didn't kill him quickly. It just killed him slowly. In Vermilion, Dakota Territory, a family of homesteaders named the Kaufmans make a critical mistake. The father, Heinrich, decides to check on his livestock when the storm hits. His wife begs him not to go. He goes anyway. He's German. He's stubborn. He doesn't like being told what to do by weather. He ties a rope around his waist and ventures out to the barn, which is about 50 yards from the house. He makes it to the barn. He checks the animals. They're fine. Then he starts back. Somewhere between the barn and the house, he loses his grip on the rope. Maybe his hands went numb. Maybe a gust of wind ripped it away. Doesn't matter. He loses the rope. And once you lose the rope, you're dead. He wanders for hours, calling for his wife, calling for help. She hears him. She stands at the window and hears her husband screaming her name. But she can't go out. She has 3 children inside. If she goes out, she might not make it back. And then all 4 of them will die. So she listens to her husband scream. For hours. Until he stops. He's found the next day. Frozen solid, sitting upright against the side of his own barn. He'd been 10 feet from the door. 10 feet. If he'd reached out, he could have touched it. But he didn't know. He just sat down to rest and the cold took him. His wife never recovers. She moves back to Germany within a year and never speaks of the prairie again. These are the stories no one talks about, the ones that don't make it into history books because they're too brutal, too personal, too devastating. History likes clean narratives, heroes and villains, clear lessons. But the Schoolhouse Blizzard doesn't have any of that. It's just chaos and death and people making reasonable decisions that end in tragedy. Back in your house, the light is starting to fade. It's only 3 p.m, but the storm is so thick that it's blocking the sun. The world is slipping into an early twilight. Your wife lights a lamp. The flame flickers in the draft. You both sit by the fire and don't talk. What is there to say? You're alive. Emma might not be, and you can't do anything about it except wait. Outside, the wind howls. It sounds almost like voices, like the prairie itself is screaming. You close your eyes and try not to imagine your daughter out there, alone, calling for you. But you can't stop. The image is burned into your brain. Emma in her good dress with the embroidered flowers, running through the snow, falling, getting up, falling again, crying for her mama, for her papa, for anyone, and no one coming, because no one can, because the storm doesn't care about love or family or prayers. It just kills, efficiently, brutally, without mercy. You open your eyes and stare into the fire. Tomorrow when the storm clears, you'll go looking. You'll find her. She'll be fine. She has to be fine, because the alternative is unthinkable, and you're not ready to think the unthinkable. Not yet. You didn't sleep. No one did. All night long, the wind screamed like something alive and furious, and you sat by the fire listening to it, imagining your daughter's voice mixed in with the howling. Your wife eventually stopped crying around 3 a.m, not because she felt better, because the human body can only produce so many tears before it just shuts down. Now she's sitting on the bench staring at the wall, her hands folded in her lap like she's praying, but her lips aren't moving. She's somewhere else, somewhere her brain can handle. Around 5 a.m, you notice something. The wind has stopped. Not slowed down. Stopped. The sudden silence is so complete it feels like the world has ended. You walk to the door and crack it open. The cold that rushes in is brutal, like being slapped with a frozen hand, but the air is clear. You can see stars, actual stars. For the first time in 18 hours you can see more than 3 feet in front of your face. You grab your coat, the heavy one lined with wool, and wrap a scarf around your face. Your wife looks up. "Don't," she says. Just that one word. But you're already out the door because staying inside for one more second will drive you insane. The snow is deep, deeper than you've ever seen it. In some places it's up to your chest. In others the wind has scoured it down to bare ground. The drifts are strange, sculpted into hard waves like frozen ocean swells. You've lived on the prairie for 15 years and you've never seen snow do this. The temperature is somewhere around 40 below zero. You can feel it in your lungs with every breath. The air is so cold it hurts to inhale. Your face goes numb within seconds, even with the scarf. Your fingers are already tingling inside your gloves. This is the kind of cold that kills you if you're not careful. The kind that makes you want to sit down and rest. And once you sit down, you don't get back up. You start walking toward the schoolhouse. It's only a mile away, but in snow this deep it might as well be 10. Every step is exhausting. You sink, pull your leg out, take another step, sink again. It's like walking through wet concrete. After 10 minutes, you're sweating under your coat, which is dangerous because sweat freezes. You stop to catch your breath, and that's when you see Ole's barn, or what's left of it. The entire north wall has collapsed inward, buried under a massive drift. You wonder if Ole made it home. You wonder if his horses survived. Here's a historical fact. In the aftermath of the Schoolhouse Blizzard, rescue parties discovered that many farm animals had suffocated in their barns. The snow was so fine and powdery that it penetrated through every crack and gap, filling stalls and pens. Cattle, horses, pigs and chickens were found buried alive, frozen in place where they stood. Some farmers lost their entire herds in a single night. For homesteaders who depended on their livestock for survival, This was often a death sentence delayed by a few months. You keep walking. The sun is starting to rise, painting the snow pink and gold. It's beautiful in a way that feels obscene. How dare the world look this pretty when your daughter is missing? You pass the Fisher farm. The house looks intact, but there's no smoke coming from the chimney. That's bad. That means no one's tending the fire. That means either they're dead or they're too injured to move. You want to stop and check, but the schoolhouse is closer. Emma first. Then you'll help the Fishers. When you finally see the schoolhouse, your heart drops into your stomach. The building is still standing, which is something, but the door is hanging open. Snow has drifted inside. You can see it piled up against the desks through the window. You force yourself to move faster, thrashing through the snow like a drowning man. When you reach the door, you stop. You're terrified to go inside, terrified of what you might find, or worse, what you might not find. You step inside. The room is freezing, the stove is cold, long since burned out. The desks are knocked over, papers are scattered everywhere, half buried in snow. But there are no children, no bodies, no Emma. You stand there in the silence, not sure if this is good news or bad news. Did Miss Royce keep them here? Did they leave? Where did they go? Then you see something that makes your blood run cold. Footprints, small footprints, leading out the door, leading east, toward your farm, toward home. Emma tried to make it home. She was so close. Less than 100 yards from the schoolhouse to your door. But in a blizzard, 100 yards might as well be 100 miles. You follow the footprints. They're already half filled with wind-blown snow, barely visible. After 20 feet, they disappear completely. The wind erased them. Erased any trace of which direction she went. You stand there, turning in circles, screaming her name. Emma! Emma! Your voice cracks. Your throat is raw, but there's no answer. Just the vast, empty silence of the prairie under fresh snow. Other men are emerging from their houses now. You can see them in the distance, small black figures against the white landscape. Everyone has the same idea. Find the children. Find the missing. Find out who survived and who didn't. You see Johann Meyer walking toward his daughter's school. You see Thomas Olsen checking his barn. You see a woman you don't recognize standing in her yard, just standing there, not moving, like she's forgotten what she was supposed to do. You force yourself to think logically. Emma left the schoolhouse heading east. Your farm is east, but in the blizzard, with zero visibility, she could have gotten turned around. She could have walked in circles. She could be anywhere within a quarter-mile radius of the schoolhouse. You start a grid pattern, walking back and forth, scanning the snow for any sign. A piece of clothing, a hand sticking up. Anything. After an hour, you find something. It's not Emma. It's one of the Miller boys, half buried in a drift next to a fence post. He's frozen solid, his arms wrapped around the post like he was trying to hold on. His eyes are open, staring at nothing. He's 7 years old. Was 7 years old. You stand there looking at him, and something inside you breaks. This child died within sight of his own house. You can see the Miller farm from here, 200 yards away. He was so close. You don't have the strength to dig him out. You mark the spot with a piece of cloth tied to the fence and keep searching, because Emma is still out there. She has to be. And you're going to find her. You have to find her. Because the alternative is unthinkable. By noon, the sun is bright and the temperature has warmed up to a balmy -20. Progress. You've been searching for 7 hours. Your feet are numb. Your face feels like raw meat. You've found 3 more bodies. None of them are Emma. Each discovery is its own small horror. A teenage boy curled up behind a haystack, so close to safety he could have touched it. A woman face down in the snow, her arms stretched out like she was swimming. A child so small you can't tell if it's a boy or girl until you brush the snow off their face. Other men have joined the search now. Ole made it home, minus 3 toes and an ear. But he's out here anyway, limping through the snow with a determination that borders on madness. Johann Meyer found his daughter alive at the schoolhouse, along with 8 other children who survived the night by burning desks and huddling together for warmth. But 5 children from that school are still missing. Thomas Olsen's barn collapsed, killing 6 of his cows and his prize horse. He's out searching anyway because his nephew was at school when the storm hit. You all work in a loose grid, calling out when you find something. Body here, someone shouts from the south. Got another one from the west. The calls come every 30 minutes or so. Each one feels like a punch to the gut. The snow is so deep and the landscape so transformed that familiar landmarks are gone. You can't tell where roads were. Can't tell where fields end and pastures begin. Everything is just white, endless white, broken only by the occasional fence post or building. Here's a disturbing detail. Many of the bodies were found in clusters, siblings who had tried to make it home together, friends who had held hands, students who had followed their teacher into the storm. They died together, huddled for warmth, their bodies creating small caves in the snow. Some were found less than 50 feet from shelter. Others had walked miles in the wrong direction, their frozen tracks telling stories of confusion and desperation. One group of children was discovered in a perfect circle, their arms linked facing inward. They tried to create a living windbreak. It hadn't worked. Around 2 p.m, you hear a shout that sounds different. Not the flat, defeated tone of someone finding another body. This is urgent, excited. Over here! She's alive! You run, or try to run, thrashing through the snow toward the voice. It's Ola. He's found a girl, maybe 10 years old, buried in a snowdrift next to a barn. She's unconscious, but breathing. Her lips are blue. Her hands are black with frostbite. But she's alive. Someone's daughter is alive. 3 men carry her to the nearest farmhouse. You watch them go, feeling a complicated mix of hope and jealousy. Someone else's child survived. Why not yours? You hate yourself for thinking this, but you can't help it. Every minute that passes without finding Emma is another minute of hope draining away. The human body can survive maybe an hour in these conditions if you're moving, generating heat. Maybe 2 hours if you find shelter. It's been almost 20 hours since the storm hit. The math is brutal and unforgiving. You keep searching. You find a boy's hat stuck to a fence, frozen solid. You find a lunch pail, the kind mothers pack with bread and butter and maybe an apple. You find a shoe, just one shoe, child-sized, half buried in the snow. Each item is a small tragedy, evidence of a life interrupted mid-stride. You don't stop to think about what these items mean. You just mark their locations and keep moving. By 4 p.m, the sun is starting to set. The temperature is dropping again. You're so tired you can barely stand. Your legs are shaking. Your fingers have gone past numb into that dangerous territory where you can't feel them at all. Your wife appears in the distance, bringing you food and a blanket. You try to eat, but your jaw's so cold it barely works. The bread tastes like cardboard. The water in your flask has frozen solid. Come home, your wife says. You'll die out here. You shake your head. I have to find her. Your wife starts crying again. She's gone, she whispers. She's been gone since yesterday. You have to accept it. You want to hit something, want to scream, want to do anything except accept what she's saying. Because accepting it means giving up. And you're not ready to give up, but the light is fading. And searching in the dark is suicide. You let your wife lead you home, hating every step. Inside, the fire is burning. Soup is on the stove. The house is warm and alive and utterly wrong without Emma in it. You sit down and put your head in your hands. Your wife sits next to you. Neither of you speaks. What is there to say? That night, you lie awake and listen to the wind starting up again. Not as strong as yesterday. Just a breeze, really. But it's enough to make you think about Emma out there, alone, buried somewhere under all that snow, waiting for you to find her. Or maybe not waiting anymore. Maybe just gone. Just one more small tragedy in a storm that created hundreds of them. January 14th, 1888. Second day of searching. The sun is bright, the sky is clear, and the prairie looks like a Christmas card painted by someone who hates you. You're out at first light, along with 20 other men from neighbouring farms. You've organised now. Someone brought a map and divided the area into sections. Each group takes a section and searches it systematically. It's efficient, it's logical, it's the kind of thing you should have done yesterday. But yesterday everyone was operating on panic and hope. Today there's less hope. Today is about recovery, not rescue. Everyone knows it, but no one says it out loud. You're not looking for survivors anymore. You're looking for bodies. You're looking so families can have funerals, so mothers can bury their children, so the community can begin the impossible process of grieving and moving on. By 10 a.m, your group has found 6 more bodies. One of them is Miss Royce, the school teacher. She's lying face down in the snow, her arms stretched toward a building that turns out to be the boarding house where she lived. She almost made it. Another 30 feet and she would have been safe, but 30 feet might as well have been 30 miles in a blizzard. She froze to death within sight of her own door. Just like your daughter might have frozen to death within sight of yours. Around noon, you find Emma. She's curled up behind a small rise in the ground, maybe 70 yards from your front door. She's on her side, her knees pulled up to her chest, her hands tucked under her armpits. Her good dress with the embroidered flowers is torn and dirty. Her face is peaceful. That's what everyone says when they find frozen children. They look peaceful, but you know better. You know she died terrified and alone, calling for you, wondering why you didn't come save her. You don't cry. You can't. Something inside you is frozen just as solid as Emma. You pick her up. She's light, so light, like a doll made of ice. You carry her home. Your wife sees you coming and drops to her knees in the snow. The sound she makes isn't human. It's something primal and broken, the sound of a mother's heart shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. You lay Emma on the kitchen table. Your wife touches her face, her hair, her hands. "She's so cold," she whispers. "We need to warm her up." You don't have the heart to tell her it's too late, that Emma will never be warm again. So you just build up the fire and let your wife hold her daughter's frozen hand and talk to her like she can still hear. Over the next week, the death toll becomes clear. In your county alone, 37 people died. 23 of them were children. Across the Dakota Territory, Nebraska and Minnesota, the number reaches 235, maybe more. Some bodies won't be found until spring when the snow melts. Some will never be found at all, lost in ravines or buried under 15-foot drifts that won't melt until April. Here's the aftermath that the history books don't talk about much. The Amputations. Loie Royce, the teacher who led her students through the storm, survived but lost both feet to frostbite. She was 23 years old. Her teaching career was over, her dancing days were over. She spent the rest of her life in a wheelchair, living on charity and bitter memories. Dozens of others lost fingers, toes, ears, noses. Ole, your neighbour, lost 3 toes and an ear. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life and never smiled again after that day. The storm didn't kill him quickly. It killed him slowly, piece by piece, year by year, until he died of pneumonia in 1892, his body just giving up. The funerals start on January 16th. There are so many that they have to be staggered. Your church handles 3 a day for a week. The ground is frozen too hard to dig graves, so bodies are stored in unheated barns until spring. Emma won't be buried until March. For 2 months she'll lie in Ole's barn, wrapped in her good quilt, frozen solid. You'll visit her every day. Your wife will stop visiting after the first week because she can't handle seeing Emma like that. But you keep going because someone needs to, because leaving her alone in that cold barn feels like abandoning her all over again. The psychological toll is immeasurable. 3 mothers in your county lose their minds completely. One walks into a blizzard the following winter and is never seen again. One drinks lye and dies in agony. One just stops speaking, stops eating, stops moving, until she wastes away to nothing. They're counted as storm deaths even though they died months later, because the storm killed them just as surely as it killed their children. The teachers who survived carry guilt that will haunt them forever. Some made the right call and kept children inside, saving lives. Others made the wrong call and sent children out into the storm, killing them. But how were they supposed to know? They were teenagers themselves, given impossible decisions with incomplete information. Minnie Freeman, who successfully led her students to safety using a rope, became a national hero. Songs were written about her. Newspapers called her the Angel of Nebraska. But she never taught again. The trauma broke something in her that never healed. You and your wife never recover. How could you? You go through the motions of living. You plant crops in the spring. You harvest in the fall. You survive another winter. but you're ghosts haunting your own lives. Every January 12th, you wake up and relive that day. The warm morning, the dark line on the horizon, the decision not to go get Emma from school because it was just a storm. How were you supposed to know? How could anyone have known? In 1890, you sell the farm and move to Omaha. You can't stay on the prairie anymore. Every snowflake is a reminder. Every cold wind is Emma's voice calling for you. You get a job in a factory. Your wife takes in sewing. You live in a small apartment above a bakery. You never have another child. You barely speak to each other. The silence where Emma used to be is too loud to talk over. You die in 1903 of heart failure. Your wife dies 6 months later of grief. On your shared gravestone, there's a third name carved underneath yours. Emma, born 1880, died 1888. Forever 8 years old, forever running through the snow toward home, forever just out of reach. The Schoolhouse Blizzard killed 235 people in a matter of hours, but it killed thousands more slowly, over years and decades, one broken heart at a time. Let's talk about the ones who got it right. Because for every story of children freezing to death 50 feet from home, there's a story of someone who made the right call under impossible circumstances. And most of those someones were teenage girls barely older than their students, making life or death decisions with about 30 seconds to think and zero training. Meet Minnie Freeman. She's 19 years old, teaching her first year at a one-room schoolhouse near Ord, Nebraska. She's bored out of her mind most days. Penmanship drills, multiplication tables, spelling bees that never end. She turned down a job in Omaha to take this position because it paid $5 more per month. $5. That's the difference between living in a city with electric lights and indoor plumbing versus living in a sod house on the prairie, where your closest neighbour is a mile away and your entertainment options are staring at the wall or staring at a different wall. But on January 12th, 1888, at approximately noon, Minnie Freeman earns every penny of that $5 and then some. The storm hits her schoolhouse like a freight train. The building literally starts coming apart. The roof lifts, not all at once, just sections of it, peeling back like someone opening a tin can. Snow pours through the gaps. The temperature inside the room drops 20 degrees in 5 minutes. The children start screaming. Minnie has 13 students ranging in age from 6 to 15. She knows that staying in this building is suicide. The roof is going, the walls are shaking, but going outside is also suicide. So she's choosing between two types of suicide, and she has about 90 seconds to decide which one kills fewer children. No pressure. Here's what she does. She grabs every piece of rope, twine and cord in the schoolhouse. Jump ropes, the rope they use to ring the bell, a clothesline from the cloakroom. She ties them all together into one long rope. Then she ties one end around her waist and starts tying the children together. Oldest first, strongest in the middle. Smallest at the back, like she's building a human chain designed to survive the apocalypse. The children are crying. Some are screaming. One little girl has already wet herself from fear. Minnie doesn't have time to comfort them. She just ties knots and counts heads. 13 students, plus her. 14 people connected by rope that's probably going to snap the second they step outside. But it's the best she can do. She knows there's a farmhouse somewhere to the east, maybe a quarter mile away. She's never walked it. She's only seen it from the schoolhouse door on clear days, but east is her best bet. So she opens the door, and the wind rips it off the hinges. Literally rips it off. The door flies away like a playing card, and suddenly they're all standing there looking into white chaos. Here's a historical fact. Minnie Freeman and her 13 students walked through the blizzard for over 3 hours. They travelled less than half a mile, but it took them 3 hours because the snow was already waist deep, and the wind kept knocking them down. At one point, Minnie lost her bearings completely. She had no idea which direction she was walking. She just kept moving because stopping meant freezing. One of the older boys, Fred Weeks, kept telling her to give up, to let them rest, to just sit down for a minute. And Minnie kept pulling him forward because she knew that sitting down meant death. She literally dragged this teenage boy through the snow, while 13 other children clung to the rope behind her, crying and begging to stop. They made it. All 14 of them stumbled into a farmhouse belonging to a Norwegian immigrant named Hansen. He opened his door to find 14 frozen humans still tied together, covered in ice, barely conscious. Not one of them died, not one lost any fingers or toes to frostbite. Minnie Freeman saved all 13 of her students using a rope and sheer determination. She became a national hero. Songs were written about her. Nebraska Minnie, they called her. Fearless. A prairie heroine. Newspapers across the country ran her story. She received marriage proposals from men she'd never met. A theatre troupe in Omaha wanted to stage a play about her. Someone tried to patent a board game called the Minnie Freeman Blizzard Adventure. She hated all of it. Because here's what the newspapers didn't report. Minnie Freeman never taught again. The trauma broke something in her that never healed. She had nightmares about the storm for the rest of her life. She'd wake up screaming, convinced she'd lost one of the children, convinced the rope had snapped, convinced she'd made the wrong call and they were all dead. She moved to Chicago in 1890 and worked as a seamstress. She married a quiet man who never asked about the storm. She lived to be 63 years old and died in 1932, and her obituary mentioned the blizzard in the first sentence. She could never escape it. That one day, that one decision, the day she became a hero and lost herself in the process. Now let's talk about someone who made the opposite call and still saved lives. His name is George Eager, and he's teaching at a schoolhouse near Plainview, Nebraska. Same storm. Same terrifying moment when the building starts coming apart, but George Eager doesn't have a rope. He doesn't know where the nearest farmhouse is. And he's got 17 children who are looking at him like he's supposed to have all the answers, so he makes a different choice. They're staying. The roof is damaged but not gone. The walls are shaking but still standing. He pulls all the desks into the centre of the room and stacks them into a makeshift windbreak. He tears pages out of textbooks and stuffs them into cracks in the walls. He takes the wooden benches and feeds them into the stove piece by piece, keeping the fire burning. For 18 hours, George Eager and his 17 students huddle in that schoolhouse. The temperature inside drops below freezing. The water bucket turns to ice. The children are so cold they can't feel their hands. But George keeps the fire going. He rotates the children, putting the coldest ones closest to the stove. He tells them stories to keep them awake because sleeping in these temperatures means death. He makes them sing songs, recite poetry, anything to keep their minds active and their bodies moving. At one point, the stove runs out of wood. George starts burning books, McGuffey readers, history textbooks, the complete works of Shakespeare that the county had sent for the older students. He burns it all. Every book in the schoolhouse goes into that stove, and when the books are gone, he starts breaking apart the teacher's desk, his own desk. The desk he built with his own hands when he took this job. They survive. All 17 children make it through the night. 3 of them have minor frostbite, one loses the tip of a finger, but they're alive, and George Eager is a hero, except he doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a coward who was too scared to take his students outside. But here's the truth. Both of them were right. Minnie Freeman made the right call for her situation. George Eager made the right call for his. There's no formula for surviving a blizzard that kills 235 people in 8 hours. There's just desperate people making impossible decisions with incomplete information and hoping they guessed right. And sometimes they did. And sometimes they didn't. Let's talk about the survivors who shouldn't have survived. The ones who made every wrong decision, violated every rule of cold weather survival, and somehow lived anyway. Because luck is a real thing, and sometimes it matters more than preparation or skill or intelligence. Walter Allen is 7 years old. He's at school when the storm hits. His teacher, Miss Johnson, tells everyone to stay inside, but Walter doesn't listen. He sees his older brother out the window trying to run home, and Walter decides to follow. He's 7. His decision-making skills are not advanced, so he just opens the door and runs. He makes it about 30 feet before he realizes he's made a terrible mistake. He can't see anything, can't hear anything except wind, can't even tell which direction he's running. He turns around to go back to the school, but the school is gone, vanished. He's standing in a white chaos with no idea where he is. Here's where it gets weird. Walter starts crying, and when he cries, he closes his eyes. And when he closes his eyes, he can think more clearly because he's not being overwhelmed by the visual chaos of the storm. So he starts walking blind, eyes closed, hands out. just stumbling forward like a tiny drunk person. He walks for what feels like hours but is probably 15 minutes. Then his hands hit something solid, a building. He feels his way along the wall until he finds a door. He opens it and falls inside. It's a barn. Not his barn. A barn belonging to a neighbour named Peterson. Walter crawls into a horse stall, buries himself in hay, and falls asleep. He's found the next morning, still sleeping, covered in hay, with his hands and feet so cold they're blue, but alive. A 7-year-old child who ran directly into a blizzard with no coat, no plan, and no survival skills, and survived because he accidentally walked in the right direction while crying. Then there's Anna Johnson. She's a teacher at a schoolhouse near Huron, Dakota Territory. When the storm hits, she makes the worst possible decision. She sends all her students home, just opens the door and tells them to run. Most of them live nearby, she figures. They know the way. They'll be fine. They're not fine. 3 of her students die within 100 yards of the schoolhouse. 2 more are found the next day, frozen solid, holding hands. Anna realises what she's done about 10 minutes after the last child leaves. The guilt is immediate and crushing. She runs out into the storm to try to find them, to bring them back, to fix her mistake. She wanders for hours, no coat, no scarf, no gloves, just running through the blizzard, screaming children's names that the wind steals from her mouth. She has no idea where she is, no idea which direction she's walking. She's just running on panic and guilt and the desperate need to undo the worst decision she's ever made. She's found 3 days later, unconscious in a snowdrift, a quarter-mile from her schoolhouse. Both her feet are frozen solid, so are 8 of her fingers. The doctor has to amputate, both feet above the ankle, 8 fingers at the first knuckle. Anna Johnson survives, but she's never the same. Not physically, not mentally, not emotionally. She spends the rest of her life in a wheelchair, paid for by donations from the community because teachers didn't get pensions in 1888. She dies in 1902 at the age of 34, officially from pneumonia, but really from 14 years of guilt and grief and the knowledge that 5 children died because she made the wrong call. Here's a fringe story that sounds fake but is apparently real. A man named Johann Schmidt was working in his field when the storm hit. He was about a mile from his house. He started walking home but got disoriented. After wandering for what he estimated was 2 hours, he realised he was walking in circles, so he did something insane. He lay down in the snow, covered himself with his coat and waited for the storm to end. For 16 hours, Johann Schmidt lay in a snowdrift while temperatures dropped to 40 below zero. He didn't sleep. He didn't move. He just lay there, breathing slowly, conserving energy, waiting. The snow piled up on top of him, creating a kind of igloo effect that trapped his body heat. When the storm finally ended and he dug himself out, he was alive, cold, hungry, traumatized, but alive. Scholars debate whether Johann Schmidt was incredibly lucky or incredibly smart. Did he know about the igloo effect? Was he familiar with Arctic survival techniques? Or did he just get lucky that the snow insulated him instead of suffocating him? No one knows. Johann died in 1891 from tuberculosis, and he never talked about the storm. When people asked, he'd just shrug and say, "I waited." And then there's the story of the Kaufmann family. Remember Heinrich Kaufmann from Chapter 2? The stubborn German farmer who went out to check on his livestock and never came back. His wife, Greta, heard him screaming her name for hours, just standing at the window listening to her husband die 50 feet away, unable to help. But here's the part we didn't mention. Their oldest son, Franz, age 13, didn't accept this. After the screaming stopped, Franz took a rope, tied one end to the kitchen doorframe and went out into the storm to find his father. His mother begged him not to go, screamed at him, tried to physically stop him, but Franz was his father's son, stubborn, determined, stupid. He followed the rope out into the darkness, feeling his way along, calling for his father, and miracle of miracles, he found him. Heinrich was still alive, barely, sitting against the barn wall, frozen and delirious. Franz grabbed his father and followed the rope back, hand over hand, step by step, dragging a full-grown man through waist-deep snow while the wind tried to knock them both down. They made it. Both of them stumbled through the door, covered in ice, barely conscious. Heinrich survived. Lost 3 fingers and his left ear to frostbite, but he survived. And Franz became a hero at age 13. The boy who saved his father's life with a rope and sheer determination. But there's a dark epilogue to this story. Franz Kaufmann never married. Never moved away from the family farm, spent his entire life taking care of his parents and working the same land. He died in 1943 at age 68, and at his funeral, people still called him the boy who saved his father. Like that one act defined his entire existence. Like nothing else he ever did mattered as much as that one night in 1888 when he was brave and stupid and incredibly lucky. So you survived. Congratulations, you're one of the lucky ones. Except luck is a relative term when you're living in 1888 with frostbite damage and no modern medicine. Because the real horror of the Schoolhouse Blizzard isn't the people who died. It's the people who survived and wish they hadn't. Let's talk about Lois Royce. Remember her? 23-year-old teacher from Massachusetts who led 17 children through the blizzard on a rope. She saved all of them. Every single child survived, but the cost was brutal. By the time they reached Ole Olson's farmhouse, Lois's feet were frozen solid. She couldn't feel them, couldn't walk, had to be carried inside and laid by the fire. For 3 days she lay there while feeling slowly returned to her feet, and with the feeling came the pain. Not just pain, agony. The kind of pain that makes you scream until your voice gives out. Her feet turned black. Then they started to smell. Then the local doctor, a man named Henderson who'd trained in Chicago and thought he'd seen everything, took one look and knew what had to be done. On January 17th, 1888, 5 days after the storm, Lois Royce underwent a double amputation. Both feet, cut off at the ankle, no anaesthesia beyond whiskey and something to bite on. The surgery took 40 minutes. She screamed for 38 of them, then she passed out. The doctor said it was better that way. Here's a historical fact. Frostbite amputations in the 1880s had about a 60% survival rate. Infection was the main killer. Gangrene, sepsis, blood poisoning. There were no antibiotics, no sterile operating rooms, just a doctor with a saw and a prayer. Lois Royce survived the surgery, but she never walked again. Not really. She got fitted for wooden feet in Omaha. Prosthetics that looked like something out of a horror movie. Carved wooden blocks attached to leather straps. She tried to adjust, tried to build a new life, but every step hurt. Every movement was a reminder of what she'd lost. And everywhere she went, people stared. Some with pity, some with curiosity, some with that grotesque fascination people have for other people's trauma. She was famous, the brave teacher who saved her students. Songs were written about her, newspapers ran her story. But all she wanted was to be anonymous and whole again. She never taught again. How could she? Standing at a blackboard for 8 hours a day when standing for 8 minutes was agony. She moved in with her sister in Illinois and spent the rest of her life doing needlework. Sewing, embroidery, small precise work that she could do sitting down. She died in 1916 at age 51. The official cause of death was influenza. The real cause was probably 30 years of chronic pain, depression, and the slow realization that saving 17 children had cost her everything. And she was one of the lucky ones, because at least she survived the surgery. Others didn't. A man named Thomas Gilkerson, the dairy farmer who froze to death less than a mile from his barn, left behind a wife and 3 children. His wife, Margaret, never recovered financially or emotionally. The farm went into foreclosure within a year. She moved to Sioux Falls and worked as a laundress, washing other people's clothes for pennies while trying to feed 3 kids. 2 of those kids died before age 20, one from tuberculosis, one from a farming accident. The third, a daughter named Catherine, grew up and married a railroad worker who drank too much and hit too hard. Margaret Gilkerson died in 1904 at age 56, broken by poverty and grief, and the knowledge that her husband had died trying to bring in hay that wouldn't have saved the cattle anyway. Then there's the psychological damage. The trauma that doesn't show up in medical records or death certificates. A teacher named Etta Shatter kept all 14 of her students alive by staying in the schoolhouse and burning every piece of wood she could find. She was a hero. The community threw her a party, gave her a bonus. 25 whole dollars, but Etta Shattuck couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that schoolhouse, hearing the wind, feeling the cold, watching the children cry. She developed what we'd now call PTSD. Back then, they called it nerves, nervous exhaustion, female hysteria. Whatever label you put on it, the result was the same. She couldn't teach, couldn't be around children, couldn't handle loud noises or sudden movements. She moved back east within 6 months and worked as a clerk in her father's store. She never married, never had children, died in 1923 at age 59, alone in a boarding house, with a newspaper clipping about the blizzard tucked in her Bible. And let's not forget the children, the survivors who grew up with missing fingers, missing toes, missing ears, who spent their entire lives as living reminders of January 12th, 1888. A boy named Peter Olson lost 3 fingers on his right hand to frostbite. He was 9 years old. Those fingers defined the rest of his life. He couldn't hold a pen properly, couldn't work most farm jobs, ended up working in a feed store, sweeping floors and loading bags because that's all his damaged hand could do. He married late, at age 37, to a widow with 2 kids because no other woman would have him. Not because he was a bad person, not because he was poor or mean or stupid, but because he had a crippled hand, and in 1888 Dakota territory, that made you damaged goods. He died in 1947 at age 68, and at his funeral, people still remembered him as the boy from the blizzard. Here's the debate that scholars still have. Was the heroism worth the cost? Should the teachers have taken the risk? Should parents have sent their kids to school that morning? There are no good answers. Just a lot of broken people trying to live with decisions they made in 60 seconds that defined the rest of their lives. You finish your dinner, the stew has gone cold while you've been thinking about Emma. About all the Emmas. About all the parents sitting in all the farmhouses across the prairie, realizing that their children aren't coming home. You look at your wife, she looks at you. Tomorrow you'll go out again. You'll search. You'll find Emma's body, and you'll carry her home, and you'll bury her in the spring when the ground thaws, and then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if there was something you could have done differently, some choice you could have made that would have changed everything. But there wasn't. There never is. Sometimes the storm just wins. Let's talk about something cheerful, like how exactly you die in a blizzard, because understanding the mechanics of freezing to death might help you appreciate just how brutal January 12th, 1888 really was. Spoiler alert, it's not like falling asleep in the snow like they show in movies. It's violent, it's painful, and it's terrifyingly fast when the wind chill drops to -100. You're still in your farmhouse 2 days after the storm. Emma is lying on the kitchen table, frozen solid. Your wife won't stop touching her, trying to warm her up, as if love and friction can reverse death. You've stopped trying to explain that it doesn't work that way, because honestly, you don't fully understand how it works either. You just know that cold kills, and it killed your daughter. But how? What actually happened to Emma's body in those hours she spent wandering through the blizzard? Here's the science. When your body is exposed to extreme cold, it goes into survival mode. Your brain makes a brutal calculation. It can't keep everything warm, so it makes choices. It prioritizes your core, your heart, your lungs, your brain. Everything else becomes expendable. Blood vessels in your extremities constrict. Your fingers, toes, ears and nose get cut off from warm blood. They're sacrificed so your vital organs can survive a little longer. This is why frostbite always starts at the extremities. Your body is literally choosing which parts of you it's willing to lose. It's not trying to kill you. It's trying to save you. But the math is ruthless. And when the temperature drops to 40 below with 70-mile-per-hour winds, the math doesn't work out in your favour. Here's a medical fact. At wind chills of -80 to -100 degrees Fahrenheit, exposed skin freezes in less than 5 minutes. Not gets cold, freezes. The water in your cells turns to ice crystals. Those crystals puncture cell walls. When you thaw out, if you thaw out, those cells are dead. Gone. They turn black and necrotic. And if infection sets in, which it usually does because this is 1888 and antibiotics won't be invented for another 40 years, you're looking at amputation or death. But frostbite is just the opening act. The real killer is hypothermia. As your core temperature drops, your body goes through stages. Each stage is worse than the last, and each stage brings you closer to death. Stage 1 is mild hypothermia. Core temperature drops from the normal 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit to about 95 degrees. You start shivering, violently, uncontrollably. Your body is trying to generate heat through muscle contractions. It burns a tremendous amount of energy. And if you're an 8-year-old girl who had bread and butter for lunch, you don't have much energy to burn. Stage 2 is moderate hypothermia. Core temperature drops to 90 to 95 degrees. The shivering stops. Not because you're warmer, because your muscles have run out of fuel. You become confused, disoriented. You can't think clearly. You can't make decisions. This is when people do stupid things, like take off their clothes. It's called paradoxical undressing, and it happens in about 20-50% of hypothermia deaths. Here's why. As your body temperature drops, the blood vessels that were constricted to preserve heat suddenly dilate. It's called terminal burrowing or hide and die syndrome. Your brain, which is now oxygen deprived and malfunctioning, interprets this sudden rush of blood to your skin as overheating. So you start stripping off your clothes. You feel hot. You feel like you're burning up. In reality, you're freezing to death. But your brain is too damaged to know the difference. Emma probably went through this. She probably took off her mittens, maybe her scarf, maybe even her coat. Not because she wanted to, but because her dying brain told her she was too hot. And by the time she realized her mistake, if she ever did, it was too late. Her hands were already frozen. Her core temperature was already dropping past the point of no return. Stage 3 is severe hypothermia. Core temperature drops below 90 degrees. You lose consciousness. Your heart rate slows. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your body is shutting down. Not all at once. Just slowly. Quietly. Efficiently. Like a machine running out of power. Your heart might beat only 3 or 4 times per minute. So slow that if someone found you, they might think you were already dead. And then you are. Your heart stops. Your breathing stops. The cold wins. And you're just another body in the snow, waiting for spring thaw so someone can find you and bury you and add your name to the list of 235 people who died on January 12th, 1888. You look at Emma lying on your kitchen table. Her skin is pale, almost blue. Her hands are blackened with frostbite. Her eyes are closed. She looks peaceful, everyone keeps saying. But you know better. You know she died confused and terrified and in pain. You know her last thoughts were probably calling for you, wondering why you didn't come save her, and you'll carry that knowledge for the rest of your life. The doctor comes by later that afternoon. Dr. Henderson, the same man who amputated Lois Royce's feet. He examines Emma more out of courtesy than necessity. There's nothing to diagnose. The cause of death is obvious, but he does it anyway. He checks her hands, her feet, her ears. He notes the frostbite damage in a small notebook. He's keeping records, documenting the storm. Someone, someday, might want to know the medical details of the Schoolhouse Blizzard. Might want to understand exactly how 235 people died. She probably lost consciousness within an hour, Dr. Henderson tells you. He means it as comfort. It's not. Because an hour is a long time when you're 8 years old and lost in a blizzard. An hour is long enough to feel every second of fear, every moment of cold, every desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, someone will find you. But no one did. No one could. Because the storm was too strong, the visibility too poor, the cold too deadly. And now Emma is gone. Just another casualty of weather that didn't care about school schedules or children or parents who loved their daughters more than life itself. Now let's talk about the statistical anomalies. The people who broke every rule of survival and lived anyway. Because sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humour. Sometimes the person who does everything wrong walks away, and the person who does everything right doesn't. Take Peter Graeber. He's 16 years old, working as a farmhand near Huron, Dakota territory. When the storm hits, he's about 2 miles from the farm, checking on cattle in the far pasture. He has no coat. Why? because it was warm that morning, and coats are heavy and awkward when you're working with animals, so he left it back at the barn. Big mistake. When the storm hits, Peter makes his second mistake. He runs. Running in a blizzard is suicide. It makes you sweat. Sweat freezes. Frozen sweat makes you colder. Plus running burns energy, which generates heat. But once you stop running, you crash hard. Your body temperature plummets. And in a blizzard where you can't see more than 3 feet, running means you have no idea where you're going. Peter runs for what he estimates is 20 minutes. He's heading toward the farm, or he thinks he is. In reality, he's running parallel to it, moving farther away with every step. When he finally stops, exhausted and soaked with sweat, he realizes he's completely lost. He can't see the farm, can't see the barn, can't see anything. Just white chaos. Third mistake. He sits down, in the snow, to rest. This is how people die. You sit down to rest, and your body temperature drops. And resting feels so good that you just keep sitting, and then you're lying down, and then you're asleep, and then you're dead. Peter sits there for maybe 5 minutes, then something weird happens. A cow walks up to him, just appears out of the snow like a ghost. It's one of the farm's cows, also lost in the storm, and this cow does something that saves Peter's life. It lies down next to him, just plops down in the snow, creating a windbreak. Peter, who is now shivering so hard he can barely think, has a moment of clarity. He burrows into the cow's side, uses its body heat, lets the cow's bulk shield him from the wind. He stays there for 8 hours. 8 hours curled up next to a cow that probably saved his life. When the storm ends, Peter stands up, stiff and cold but alive, and follows the cow back to the barn. Because cows, unlike humans, have an innate sense of direction. The cow knew where home was. Peter didn't. Sometimes being dumb and lucky is better than being smart and unlucky. Then there's the case of the Kaufmann boys. Remember Heinrich Kaufmann, the stubborn German who froze to death 50 feet from his barn. His 2 sons, ages 9 and 11, made an even worse decision. When their father didn't come back from checking the livestock, they decided to go find him. At night, in the continuing storm, with no rope, no plan, just 2 kids walking into a blizzard because they loved their dad. They lasted about 10 minutes before they were completely lost. They wandered for what they later estimated was 2 hours, calling for their father, getting colder and more exhausted with every step. Then the younger boy, Johann, spotted something. A light. Faint. Flickering. But definitely a light. Here's the thing about lights in blizzards. Sometimes they're real. Sometimes they're hallucinations. Hypothermia causes all kinds of sensory distortions. People see things that aren't there, hear voices, feel warmth where there is none. But Johann insists it's real. His older brother Karl can't see it, but he trusts Johann, so they walk toward where Johann says the light is. It turns out to be real. It's a lantern left hanging in a neighbour's barn about a quarter-mile from the Kaufmann farm. The neighbour, Ole Svensson, had hung it there hoping to guide his own son home. It didn't work for his son, who froze to death in the opposite direction. But it saved the Kaufmann boys. They stumbled into the barn, collapsed in a horse stall, and were found the next morning alive but barely. Karl lost 3 fingers to frostbite. Johann lost 2 toes and part of his left ear. But they lived. 2 boys who made every wrong decision, who should have died, who were saved by pure luck and a lantern that wasn't even meant for them. And then there's Mary Schmidt. She's 6 years old. She gets separated from her school group when they try to make a run for the nearest farmhouse. 1 minute she's holding her older sister's hand. The next, a gust of wind knocks her down, and when she gets up, everyone is gone. She's alone in a blizzard. 6 years old. She doesn't even reach the top of the snowdrifts. Mary does something that, by all logic, should have killed her. She crawls into a hollow in a snowbank. Just burrows in like a rabbit. She doesn't know about igloo effects or trapped body heat. She just knows that the snow is blocking the wind, and blocking the wind feels better than not blocking the wind. So she stays there, for 14 hours. When they find her the next morning, she's unconscious but alive. No frostbite, no permanent damage. She wakes up 2 days later and asks for her sister. Her sister, who was 13, and supposedly smarter and more capable, froze to death 15 feet from the farmhouse they were trying to reach. Mary survived because she accidentally did the right thing for the wrong reasons. These stories drive the survivors crazy. Because there's no pattern, no rules, no clear lesson to learn. Do the smart thing, you might die. Do the stupid thing, you might live. Make the right choice, you're still screwed. Make the wrong choice. Maybe a cow saves you. It's chaos, it's random, and it's deeply, deeply unfair. You think about this while looking at Emma. What if she had done something different? What if she'd crawled into a snowbank like Mary Schmidt? What if she'd found a cow like Peter Graeber? What if? What if? What if? But there are no answers. Just a dead daughter on a kitchen table and a father who will spend the rest of his life playing the what-if game. Let's talk about what happens to the survivors. The ones who made it through the blizzard but lost pieces of themselves in the process. Because in 1888, medical science is, let's call it primitive. There are no antibiotics, no painkillers beyond whiskey and laudanum, no plastic surgery, no skin grafts. You lose a body part to frostbite, you're losing it for good. Dr. Henderson, the local doctor, is a good physician by 1888 standards. He trained in Chicago. He's read the latest medical journals. He knows about germ theory, which is still controversial in some circles. But knowing about germs doesn't help much when you're dealing with severe frostbite and you have exactly 3 tools at your disposal: a saw, whiskey, and prayer. 3 days after the storm, Dr. Henderson's office looks like a battlefield hospital. He's seeing 20 patients a day. Most of them have frostbite, some mild, some moderate, some so severe that gangrene is already setting in, and the smell of rotting flesh fills the room. He does triage. The people who will definitely live go home with bandages and instructions to soak their frostbitten areas in warm water. The people who will definitely die get morphine and a bed in the back room. The people in the middle get surgery. Here's how you amputate a frostbitten limb in 1888. First, you give the patient whiskey. A lot of whiskey. You're trying to get them drunk enough that they pass out, or at least drunk enough that they don't feel the saw cutting through bone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't work, you get 2 strong men to hold the patient down while you operate. They scream. You ignore it, because the alternative is letting them die of gangrene, which is slower and more painful. Second, you cut. You use a regular bone saw, the kind you'd use to butcher a hog. You cut above the line of dead tissue into healthy flesh, because you need to leave enough viable tissue to close the wound. You cut through skin, muscle and bone. It takes about 5 minutes if you're fast and the bone isn't too thick. It takes longer if you're being careful. Most doctors in 1888 choose fast over careful. Third, you cauterize. You heat an iron in the fire until it's red hot, and you press it against the stump to seal the blood vessels. The smell is indescribable. Burning flesh. Burning blood. The patient usually passes out at this point, which is a mercy. Sometimes they die from shock. That's just part of the business. Fourth, you bandage and pray. You wrap the stump in clean cloth, which probably isn't that clean by modern standards, and you hope infection doesn't set in. About half the time it does anyway. Gangrene, sepsis, blood poisoning. The patient spikes a fever, starts hallucinating, and dies within a week. You can't stop it. You don't have antibiotics. All you can do is watch them die and try to keep them comfortable with morphine. Doctor. Henderson performs 42 amputations in the 2 weeks following the storm. Fingers, toes, hands, feet, ears, noses, 1 arm, 1 leg. He saves a lot of lives. But the people he saves are permanently changed. A farmer without fingers can't work. A woman without feet can't walk. A child without ears gets stared at for the rest of their life. These are the invisible victims of the Schoolhouse Blizzard, the ones who survived but wish they hadn't. Lois Royce, the teacher who saved all 17 of her students, is one of Dr. Henderson's patients. Both her feet are black up to the ankle. Gangrene has set in. There's no saving them. So on January 17th, 1888, Dr. Henderson amputates both of Lois's feet. She's awake for part of it. The whiskey isn't strong enough. She screams. She begs him to stop. He doesn't stop because stopping means she dies. The surgery takes an hour. She passes out from pain about 30 minutes in. When she wakes up 2 days later, her feet are gone. Just stumps wrapped in bloody bandages. Dr. Henderson tells her she's lucky. She's alive. She saved 17 children. she's a hero. Lois doesn't feel like a hero. She feels like a 23-year-old woman who will never walk again, never dance at her own wedding, never have a normal life. She gets fitted for wooden prosthetics in March. They're crude, painful. They dig into her stumps and cause sores that get infected. She learns to walk on them, sort of, more like hobbling. She hates them. She hates the storm. She hates the children she saved, which makes her feel guilty, but she can't help it. Every time she sees one of them, healthy and whole, she thinks about her feet, about what she gave up to save them. It's not fair, but nothing about the Schoolhouse Blizzard is fair. Then there are the psychological cases, the people who survived physically but broke mentally. A woman named Margaret Olson loses her husband and 2 children in the storm. She survives. And for 3 months she seems fine. She goes through the motions, buries her family, cleans her house, cooks her meals. Then, one morning in April, she walks out into a spring snowstorm wearing just her nightgown. She's found 2 days later, frozen solid, a smile on her face. The town calls it an accident. Everyone knows it wasn't. A teacher named Sarah Mitchell keeps all her students alive by barricading them in the schoolhouse and burning every piece of furniture to stay warm. She's hailed as a hero. 2 months later, she tries to hang herself in that same schoolhouse. Someone finds her in time. She survives, moves back east, never teaches again, never talks about the storm, dies in 1920 in a mental institution in Pennsylvania, still haunted by a day in January when she almost lost everything. You wonder if you're going to end up like them, broken, haunted, unable to move on. You look at Emma one more time before the undertaker comes to take her away. You memorize her face, the curve of her cheek, the embroidered flowers on her collar, because soon she'll be in the ground and all you'll have left are memories. Memories and guilt and the knowledge that you survived when she didn't. The doctor leaves you with a bottle of laudanum. For sleep, he says. You thank him. You don't tell him that you haven't slept in 3 days. That every time you close your eyes you see Emma running through the snow calling your name, that you don't deserve to sleep, that sleep is for people who didn't let their daughters die. You put the laudanum on the shelf. You'll probably use it eventually. Everyone does. Because living with this much pain isn't sustainable. Something has to give. Either you find a way to live with the guilt, or the guilt finds a way to kill you. And in January 1888, on the Dakota prairie there are a lot of ways to die. It's March 1888, 2 months after the storm. You're still on your Dakota farm, still going through the motions of living. Emma's been in the ground for 3 weeks now. The frozen earth finally thawed enough to dig. You planted her next to the old oak tree on the south side of the property. Your wife picked the spot because it gets sun in the morning, as if that matters, as if Emma can feel warmth anymore. But let's talk about something else, something bigger than your grief, because while you were burying your daughter, the United States government was having a collective panic attack about how spectacularly they failed to predict the deadliest blizzard in American history. And that panic attack would change weather forecasting forever. Or at least it would try to. In 1888, the US Army Signal Corps was responsible for weather forecasting, not the Weather Bureau. That wouldn't exist for another 3 years. The Signal Corps was a military operation staffed by soldiers who had maybe 2 weeks of meteorology training and a set of instruments that would look primitive to a middle school science class today. They had thermometers, barometers, wind gauges, and absolutely no understanding of how weather systems actually worked. Here's what they knew about the Schoolhouse Blizzard before it hit. Nothing. Here's what they predicted. Continued mild weather. Here's what actually happened. 235 people died in 8 hours. And here's what the government did afterward. Absolutely lost their minds trying to figure out how they missed it. A congressional inquiry was launched in February 1888. Senators wanted answers. Why didn't anyone see this coming? Why wasn't there a warning? Why were children dying in schoolyards while the Signal Corps was reporting fair weather ahead? The testimonies were brutal. Signal Corps officers tried to explain that weather prediction in 1888 was more art than science. That they were working with incomplete data from scattered observation stations. That atmospheric science was barely understood. That they did the best they could with what they had. Congress didn't care. Congress wanted someone to blame. Because that's what governments do when disasters happen. They find a scapegoat and pretend that fixing the scapegoat will fix the problem. Several Signal Corps officers were reprimanded, new protocols were implemented, more observation stations were promised, and absolutely none of it would have prevented the Schoolhouse Blizzard because the technology to predict fast-moving cold fronts didn't exist yet. Here's a meteorological fact. The Schoolhouse Blizzard was caused by an Arctic high-pressure system colliding with a warm, moist, low-pressure system from the south. This created a powerful cold front that moved at nearly 40 miles per hour. In 1888, weather observations were transmitted by telegraph, which was fast for the time but not fast enough. By the time data from one observation station reached the next, the weather system had already moved. It was like trying to track a speeding car using carrier pigeons. Technically possible, practically useless. Modern meteorologists, looking back at the Schoolhouse Blizzard with computer models and satellite data, can explain exactly what happened. They can show you the pressure systems, the jet stream, the temperature gradient. They can recreate the storm down to the hour, but none of that helps the people in 1888. They're living in a world where weather happens to you, not because of predictable atmospheric patterns, but because God or fate or bad luck decided it was your turn to suffer. You think about this sometimes, late at night when you can't sleep. You wonder if knowing about the storm would have changed anything. If some Signal Corps officer had sent a telegraph saying, "Massive blizzard incoming, keep children home from school," would you have listened? Would anyone? Or would people have dismissed it as government paranoia? You'll never know, because the warning never came. And Emma died 70 yards from home. But here's what did change. In 1890, Congress transferred weather forecasting from the Signal Corps to a new civilian agency, the Weather Bureau. The idea was that scientists, not soldiers, should be predicting weather. That trained meteorologists with actual education in atmospheric science would do better than military officers with 2 weeks of training and a barometer. Did it work? Eventually. The Weather Bureau invested in more observation stations, better instruments, faster communication via telegraph and later telephone. They developed standardized reporting protocols so that weather data from Montana looked the same as weather data from Texas. They started publishing daily weather maps showing pressure systems and temperature gradients. They created a national network of forecasters who could track storms as they moved across the country. But all of that took time. Years. Decades. The Weather Bureau in 1890 wasn't much better at predicting blizzards than the Signal Corps in 1888. They just had better branding. It wasn't until the 1920s, when Norwegian meteorologists developed the polar front theory and introduced the concept of air masses, that weather forecasting became somewhat reliable. And it wasn't until the 1960s, with the advent of weather satellites and computer modelling, that meteorologists could actually see storms forming and track them in real time. By then, you're long dead. Emma's been in the ground for 70 years. The oak tree has grown tall and thick, and the prairie has transformed from a deadly frontier into neat rows of corn and soybeans, irrigated and predictable. The weather still kills people, of course. Tornadoes, floods, heat waves, but not like it did in 1888. Not with that casual brutality, that sudden, shocking violence. You finish your coffee and look out the window. The sky is clear. The wind is calm. It's just another March day on the Dakota prairie, but you'll never trust the weather again. Never look at a blue sky without wondering when it's going to turn white with snow and wind and death. Because you learned something the government is still figuring out. Weather isn't predictable, it's survivable, and sometimes not even that. Let's talk about the bigger picture, because the Schoolhouse Blizzard didn't just kill 235 people, it killed something else, something intangible, but equally important. It killed the myth of the American frontier, the idea that anyone with grit and determination could make a life on the prairie, that the West was a land of opportunity where hard work guaranteed success. Before January 12, 1888, the government was actively encouraging settlement of the Great Plains. The Homestead Act of 1862 promised 160 acres of free land to anyone willing to live on it and farm it for 5 years. Railroad companies printed brochures showing lush farmland and happy families harvesting abundant crops. Government officials gave speeches about manifest destiny and the promise of westward expansion. Come to Dakota territory, they said. Come to Nebraska, build a life, raise a family, pursue the American dream. And people came, by the thousands. Immigrants from Norway, Sweden, Germany and Ireland. Americans from the crowded East Coast looking for land and opportunity. They built sod houses, planted wheat, raised cattle. They endured harsh winters and dry summers and grasshopper plagues. But they survived. They persevered because they believed in the myth. They believed that hard work and determination would overcome any obstacle. Then the Schoolhouse Blizzard happened, and suddenly the myth looked a lot more fragile. Because it turns out you can't outwork the weather. You can't persevere through a blizzard that drops the temperature 60 degrees in 3 hours. You can't manifest destiny your way through visibility so poor you get lost 3 feet from your own door. Some things are bigger than human will. Some forces don't care about your dreams or your work ethic or how badly you want to succeed. The exodus began almost immediately. In the spring of 1888, families started leaving, packing up what they could carry and heading back east, or heading farther west to Oregon or California, where the weather was gentler and the land more forgiving. Census data shows that dozens of counties in Dakota Territory and Nebraska lost population between 1888 and 1890. Some towns that had been thriving in 1887 were ghost towns by 1889. Here's a historical fact. In the 2 years following the Schoolhouse Blizzard, Dakota Territory lost an estimated 10-15% of its homesteading population. These weren't failures or quitters. These were people who did everything right. They worked hard. They built homes, they planted crops, and then their children froze to death in a snowstorm and they realized that maybe hard work isn't enough. Maybe some places aren't meant for human habitation. Maybe the government lied, because that's what it was, a lie, not an intentional one maybe, but a lie nonetheless. The government promised safety and opportunity. They delivered brutal winters, summer droughts, and children dying in schoolyards. And when confronted with this reality, the government's response was basically, well, you should have been more prepared. As if any amount of preparation could have saved Emma. As if any amount of foresight could have predicted a storm that moved faster than news could travel. Your neighbours, the Olsons, left in April 1888. Ol survived the storm but lost 3 toes and an ear. His wife lost her mind watching her children nearly die. They packed their wagon and headed back to Minnesota. I'm done with this place, Ol told you. Done with the cold and the wind and the constant fear. I'd rather be poor in Minnesota than rich in hell. You understood. You thought about leaving too. But where would you go? Emma's buried here. Leaving feels like abandoning her all over again. The Fisher family left in May. The Kaufmans in June, the Schmidt family in August. By the end of 1888, half the families in your township were gone. The schoolhouse closed because there weren't enough children. The church shut down because there weren't enough parishioners. The general store in town went out of business because there weren't enough customers. The prairie started reclaiming abandoned farms. Sod houses collapsed. Fences fell. Wheat fields went fallow. And the government? The government kept publishing brochures. Keep trying to attract new settlers. Offering the same promises, the same lies. Come to Dakota, build a life. Just ignore the fact that a few hundred people froze to death here last year. That's just bad luck. Won't happen again? Probably. But people weren't as gullible anymore. Word spread. Newspapers back east ran stories about the Schoolhouse Blizzard, about children dying, about teachers losing feet, about the brutal reality of prairie life. Immigration to the Great Plains slowed, not stopped. People kept coming because people are desperate and optimistic and sometimes stupid. But the flood of settlers turned into a trickle. The myth of the American frontier had been exposed as propaganda. Here's the debate that scholars have. Did the Schoolhouse Blizzard fundamentally change American westward expansion? Some argue yes, that it marked a turning point when people started questioning the government's promises, when the frontier stopped being seen as opportunity and started being seen as dangerous. Others argue that it was just one event among many, that droughts and grasshopper plagues and economic depressions did more to slow settlement than one blizzard. But for the people who lived through it, for the parents who buried their children, for the teachers who lost their feet, it wasn't academic. It was personal. The frontier had killed their families, and no amount of free land or government promises could bring them back. You stay because you have nowhere else to go, because Emma's grave is here, and leaving feels like betrayal. But you never encourage anyone else to come. When relatives back east write asking about opportunities in Dakota, you tell them the truth. It's hard here. Brutally hard. The winters will try to kill you. The summers aren't much better, and sometimes, no matter how careful you are, no matter how prepared, the weather wins, and you lose everything. By 1890, the population of your township has stabilised at about half what it was in 1887. The survivors are tough, bitter, traumatised, but still here, still farming, still pretending that this is a life worth living. You plant wheat in the spring and harvest it in the fall. You survive another winter and another. And slowly, quietly, the myth rebuilds itself. Not the government's myth of easy opportunity, but a harder, darker myth. The myth of survival. The myth that says we made it through the worst winter in history and we're still standing. That's worth something. Maybe, but you never forget. None of the survivors do. Every January 12, you wake up and remember. Emma running into the storm. Emma freezing 70 yards from home. Emma buried under the oak tree that's slowly growing over her grave. The American dream killed your daughter. And you're still here, living in its ruins. It's 1903. 15 years after the storm. You're older now, greyer, slower. Your wife died last year. Her heart, the doctor said, but you know better. She died of grief. 15 years of carrying the weight of Emma's death finally crushed her. You buried her next to Emma under the oak tree. Now you're alone on a farm that feels too big and too empty, but the world has moved on. The Schoolhouse Blizzard is fading from memory. Oh, people still talk about it, especially the old-timers who lived through it. They gather at church socials and town meetings and tell stories. Remember when? Remember that day? Remember how cold it got? The stories have taken on a mythic quality. The details have been smoothed and polished through repetition until they sound like legends instead of memories. Minnie Freeman, the teacher who saved 13 children by leading them through the blizzard, is still famous. Songs were written about her. Nebraska's fearless maid. She's been interviewed by newspapers across the country. She received over 80 marriage proposals from men who'd never met her. She's a symbol now, the heroic school teacher who conquered the storm. Except she didn't conquer anything. She survived. And survival isn't victory. It's just not dying. She moved to Chicago in 1890, never taught again. The storm broke something in her. She has nightmares, panic attacks. What we'd now call PTSD, but in 1903 is just called nerves, or female hysteria. She married a quiet accountant who doesn't ask about the storm. They don't have children. She doesn't want to be responsible for anyone else's life. Once was enough. Lois Royce. The teacher who lost both feet saving her students is still alive, but barely. She lives with her sister in Illinois. The prosthetic feet never worked properly. She's essentially wheelchair-bound. She gets infections regularly because the stumps never healed right. She'll die in 1916, but really she died in 1888. She's just been dying slowly for 28 years. The children who survived have grown into adults. Some left the prairie, others stayed. All of them carry the storm with them. Peter Olson, who lost 3 fingers to frostbite, works at a feed store in Omaha. He's married with 2 kids, but he can't hold a pen properly, can't play with his children the way other fathers do. His damaged hand defines his life in ways big and small. Every day is a reminder of January 12th, 1888, and then there are the forgotten ones. The survivors who didn't make it into newspaper stories, the parents who lost children and never spoke of it again, the siblings who watched brothers and sisters freeze to death, the communities that were gutted by the storm and never recovered. History remembers the heroes and the victims. It forgets the people in between, the ones who just survived and kept living because that's what you do. Here's what changed after the Schoolhouse Blizzard. Schools started keeping emergency supplies, fuel for 3 days, food, blankets. Teachers were given protocols for severe weather. If visibility drops below a certain level, keep the children inside. Don't try to send them home. Don't try to lead them anywhere, just wait it out. It seems obvious now. It wasn't obvious in 1888. Counties started building better roads, installing markers and guide wires so people could find their way in storms. Not everywhere, not quickly, but slowly infrastructure improved. Telegraph lines went up. Telephone lines followed. Communication got faster. Not fast enough to prevent another Schoolhouse Blizzard, but fast enough that warnings could reach more people more quickly. And weather forecasting got better. Slowly, incrementally. The Weather Bureau invested in research, in observation stations, in training meteorologists who actually understood atmospheric science. By 1903, they can predict major storms with maybe 24 hours notice. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Better than waking up to a warm morning and being dead by nightfall. But the biggest change is psychological. The survivors of the Schoolhouse Blizzard taught their children to fear the weather, to respect it, to never trust a blue sky. Those children grew up cautious, prepared, paranoid maybe, but alive. And they taught their children the same lessons, and those children taught theirs. The trauma of January 12th, 1888, echoed through generations. It's still echoing. In the way Great Plains farmers watch the sky. In the way schools have emergency protocols. In the collective memory of the region. You finish your dinner. Porridge, as always. You've eaten porridge every night for 15 years. Your wife used to vary the menu. Stew, bread, sometimes meat. But since she died, you haven't bothered. Porridge is easy, porridge is enough. You sit by the fire and think about Emma, about your wife, about the life you could have had if January 12th, 1888, had been just another day. Tomorrow is January 13th, the day after. You'll wake up like you do every year on this date. You'll walk out to the oak tree. You'll stand at Emma's grave and remember her. 8 years old, forever. The embroidered flowers on her collar, her voice, her laugh, the way she used to bounce on her toes when she was excited. All of it gone, frozen, lost. And then you'll go back inside. You'll make porridge. You'll tend the farm. You'll survive another day. Because that's what you do. That's what all the survivors do. You carry the dead with you and keep moving forward because the alternative is lying down in the snow and not getting back up. And you've already lost too much to give up now. The Schoolhouse Blizzard killed 235 people in 8 hours. But it killed thousands more slowly. The survivors, the families, the communities, the myth of the American frontier. It broke something fundamental in the psyche of the Great Plains, a belief that hard work and determination were enough, that humans could conquer nature, that tragedy was something that happened to other people. January 12th, 1888, taught an entire generation that sometimes, no matter what you do, the storm wins, and all you can do is remember the dead, honour their memory, and try not to let it happen again. It's 2025. You're reading this on a screen in a heated room with a weather app that tells you the temperature down to the degree. You've never had to wonder if the sky's about to kill you. You've never lost a child to weather. You probably think you'd survive the Schoolhouse Blizzard because you're smart and prepared, and you've watched enough survival shows to know the basics. You wouldn't. Here's the math. Temperature drops 60 degrees in 3 hours. Wind speeds hit 70 miles per hour. Visibility drops to 0 in 5 minutes. You're at work or school when it hits. Your phone is dead because it's 1888 and phones won't exist for another century. No weather alerts, no emergency broadcasts, no GPS to guide you home. Just you, the clothes on your back, and a storm that's moving faster than you can run. Your house is a mile away. You know the route. You've walked it 1,000 times. But in a whiteout blizzard, you can't see your own hand. You take 3 steps and you're lost. Completely, utterly lost. The cold hits like a fist. Your face goes numb in seconds. Your fingers stop working. Your brain starts shutting down, convincing you that taking off your coat is a good idea because you're so hot. You're burning up. Except you're not. You're dying. You've got maybe an hour before hypothermia wins. Maybe less if you panic and run, burning through your energy reserves. You try to think logically, but your oxygen-starved brain is already making bad decisions. Do you keep walking? Do you stop and wait? Do you try to build a snow shelter with hands that can't feel anything? Every choice leads to the same place, a snowdrift. a frozen body, a grieving family. Here's what the survivors of the Schoolhouse Blizzard learned. You can't outwork nature. You can't manifest destiny your way through a storm that wants you dead. All your modern knowledge, all your confidence, all your preparation means nothing when the temperature drops to 40 below and the wind is screaming and you can't see the ground you're standing on. Emma was 8 years old. She made it 70 yards from home before she died. 70 yards. You could throw a rock that far. Professional athletes have lost their lives closer to shelter than that. Experienced outdoorsmen. People who knew what they were doing. Because the storm doesn't care about your experience or your intelligence or how badly you want to live. 235 people died on January 12th, 1888. Most of them were children. Smart children. Brave children. Children who did everything right and still froze to death within sight of their own doors. And you, sitting in your climate-controlled environment, with your weather app and your survival knowledge, would probably join them. The wind howls outside your window tonight. Just a breeze, really. Nothing dangerous. But for a moment, imagine it getting stronger. Imagine the temperature dropping. Imagine not being able to see your own house from your driveway. Imagine your children at school trying to run home. Imagine being helpless. Imagine the math not working in your favour. The Schoolhouse Blizzard happened because people trusted a warm morning, because they believed tomorrow would be like today, because they sent their children to school on a day that seemed safe. They made reasonable decisions based on reasonable assumptions, and 235 people died. So here's your moral dilemma. If you woke up in 1888 on January 12th to a warm morning after weeks of brutal cold, would you send your children to school? Would you trust the weather? Would you risk it? Or would you keep them home based on nothing but a bad feeling? Remember, you don't know what's coming. You don't have a weather app. You just have a blue sky and a decision to make. Would you gamble with your children's lives on a day that looked perfectly safe? Or would you listen to the little voice in your head that says something's wrong? The survivors spent the rest of their lives wondering if they made the right choice. Now it's your turn. What would you do?